Welcome to our signature series, Leading in Extraordinary Times. This is the third year of this partnership with Microsoft. Thank you very much to Microsoft for this partnership. Thank you as well to our secondary sponsor, Huawei Philippines, and to our media partners, ANC and BusinessWorld. We started this series just months into the pandemic to give members and other executives the opportunity to hear from and talk with each other about navigating the crisis. It is as relevant today as it was then because we continue to experience the long-term effects of the pandemic, but also the challenges and the opportunities it has opened up. Our speaker today is Lito Tayag, head of Accenture Philippines and a member of the MBC board. Hi, Lito. Hello as well to our board members joining us today. I saw Ramon Del Rosario there. I think Dr. Aris Alip is also joining us. And here in the room, Itos Cruz, formerly of SGV, joins us as well. Lito has been with Accenture since 2002, building it into a 70,000 strong team, one of the country's biggest employers and the country's biggest BPO by revenue. While most of Accenture Philippines is BPO, Lito has also built it into a major IT consultant. With Accenture's recent moves into strategy consulting, Lito is also building that in the Philippines now. His workforce is not only huge, it is a leader in diversity, winning recognition within the Accenture family and elsewhere. Lito's executive ability and his focus on people made him an essential leader during the pandemic, not just for Accenture, but for the BPO sector as well. He was the chair of the IT BPO Association at that time, IBPAP. BPOs moved more than 1 million people from high-tech offices to homes with varied levels of convenience and internet connectivity. They kept them employed. They helped keep the economy afloat, and they even grew during that time. How they did that, how they took care of their people, their clients, and their communities, and the future of work and the industry are all in Lito's talk today. It will be a very interesting talk, and we look forward to hearing it and to your questions afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, Lito Tayag.
Thank you very much, Coco, for that very kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this series. The Makati Business Club series is pegged as Leading in Extraordinary Times. And as I was preparing for this talk, I was wondering whether there was really a difference in the exercise of leadership according to the different times that we have. I will not answer the question, my own question, and instead, in the next few slides, I will tell you the Accenture story. In my long career, I spent this in only one industry, the last 2.5 years have indeed been extraordinary. It was extraordinary, of course, in terms of scale, because every business, whether it's local or global, have been impacted. And in fact, we know that many businesses closed down during the pandemic, either temporarily or permanently. And from a socio-economic perspective, many people lost their livelihoods, and many of our countrymen have slid back into poverty and hunger. For us, specifically in the IT BPM industry, our own employees' livelihood or jobs were at risk. It also meant the disruption of our global clients who rely on us for their operations. And as we were, at least the IT BPO industry was primarily in an export zone as part of PEZA, the workplaces were not available and the homes, as we know, were not configured and did not have the right infrastructure for work. It was, of course, a time of crisis. And in a crisis, I believe that the best approach is to go back to our core values, to who we are as leaders, reflecting on who we are as a company. So as a response to the times, we anchored all of the initiatives that we have as a responsible business. As a responsible company, we put our people's welfare first. As a responsible client partner, we had to ensure that we continue our high performance services to our local and global clients. And as a responsible corporate citizen, we also made sure that we support the others in our community who were just as impacted or probably worse impacted by the crisis. Let me briefly talk about what this meant for us concretely. To put this in the context, at the beginning of the pandemic, Accenture in the Philippines had about 55,000 people. We were operating in 3 major cities, Metro Manila, Cebu, and Ilocos, and we were in about 25 buildings, or occupying portions, if not full, of the 25 buildings. As a responsible company, our priority was our people, their health, their well-being. But we also had to put priority for their jobs and their livelihood and their ability to stay productive. Let me pick a few things in this business slide to show you the initiatives that we did, some of the new initiatives that we did under this extraordinary situation. First, on the health and well-being of our people, we expanded the medical coverage in collaboration with our provider, and included telecommunication calls and home health care. We provided more counseling sessions because we found out that the mental health was as much at risk as the physical health due to COVID. And like most companies, of course, we procured our own vaccines and we procured our own test kits. We are a services company, but we purchased oxygen tanks and oxygen concentrators for our people, especially at the height where people were awaiting slots in hospitals. And at some point, we had many in the Philippines. Second, we equipped their homes with much needed technology and other tools to make it a more conducive place for work. Their laptops, and because of the lockdown, we had to deliver their laptops and their desktops into their homes. We accelerated their connectivity where before there was not many. And we worked with our partners in telcos, initially with Wi-Fi, and then later on we facilitated fiber internet connection in their homes. One of the things that we did quite differently from many others is that we gave them a substantial allowance for home workplace equipment. And then we hope that enable their workplace at home. This allowance, they could use it to buy anything that will help them at their home to make it a better place, including air conditioning, a better chair, a better table, for example. And to point that it was quite substantial that we got some comments that, especially from those who are selling this equipment, that single-handedly we made an impact in the economy, because all of our people, all at that time 55,000 of them, were purchasing all of this necessary equipment for their home enablement. And third, of course, despite the pandemic, we had to maintain the culture of engagement. It was a completely different way of working, and we had to be conscious of the impact to the culture as well as to the productivity of the people. At the same time, we had to maintain our usual responsible business metrics, including gender hiring. We wanted to ensure that we hire the same gender level, gender equality during the pandemic as we did before the pandemic as well. Of course, we had to make significant investment in new ways of providing learning and capability development. As we took care of our people, our clients, on the other hand, expected the same high-performance services from us, since they were going through their own challenges. At the beginning, of course, we had to invoke our business continuity plans and practices, which we had been practicing all this time because we have a lot of natural disasters in the Philippines, and it came in handy. And then later on, of course, is that we had to continue to delight our clients and make sure that we maintain all agreed service levels. And because we are working in a different location, we had to assure our clients that the security of their data and their operations was secured at the homes where it was serviced from. Of course, we supported our clients who had new requirements. The pandemic has created new requirements for them, both in operations and in technology, and we had to be in step with those changes that they required. And they themselves have embarked on an accelerated digital transformation. And we had to support those digital transformation that have been accelerated because of the pandemic. I remember extraordinary times during this extraordinary 2.5 years. And first, this was the beginning, of course. And then the second was the Delta surge, which was around July of last year. We had the Typhoon Odette that happened in the middle of the pandemic in late of last year. Then we had the Omicron surge at the beginning of the year, and now we have another kind of surge. During all these times, our top leadership in the country met every day, monitoring our key metrics on people, on clients, on our business. On a daily basis, we made sure we knew who or the number of people who were infected, who are in the hospitals, who are in line for the hospitals, and even, sadly, how many of our people passed away. We knew which projects for our clients were actually at risk of service level breach, and so we made proactive attempts to make sure that we provide some support either on a business continuity mode or a complement from our other locations. And of course, we made sure that we were clear with what new investments we had to make for our people and for our clients. While we took care of our people, we knew that the rest of the community was more severely impacted. I am very proud that as a company, we have stepped out in reaching out to our communities. At the height of the pandemic, we knew that many lost their jobs and many slid back to hunger and poverty. So we donated, as a company in the Philippines, $5 million to support our communities. In cooperation with Caritas Manila, we provided food vouchers to about 180,000 families that tied them over for about a week. And based on the size of the Philippine family, is that we would have touched the lives of about 1 million people during the height of the pandemic. While still having all of these issues in the pandemic, of course, we knew that Typhoon Odette struck in Cebu. And many of our people and our communities were impacted. In order to help our people and our communities, we had to charter 4 cargo flights by Accenture from Manila because the supply chain in Cebu was severely and negatively impacted. I'm also very proud that during the pandemic, our own people stepped up. We had been able to raise more than 5 million at one point, in one fundraising, 5 million pesos from their own pockets, from our employees' pockets, in order to support our corporate citizenship programs for our communities who were severely impacted. Of course, all throughout the 2.5 years, we found a way to digitally continue our advocacy for skills to succeed for the youth who needed the jobs badly. All those challenges said and overcome, and despite the difficult times, we achieved amazing results. We went from 55,000 at the beginning, and today we have more than 72,000 people in the Philippines. We have more clients to serve, and we were able to build new capabilities, including more higher value services like strategy and consulting. We have been able to prove that during this pandemic, being a responsible business is good for business. And while we are proud and happy of our business outcomes, the times keep changing, and the times stay extraordinary. So how and where do we go from here?
To prepare ourselves for the path ahead, there are some areas that we focused on. We focused on the work arrangement for our people. We have proven that we can do and stay productive without having to go to the office. But we also knew that there are some things that we cannot do from the home alone. And so, as we said, our future is going to be a hybrid. And we know that for all industries, there are going to be very few who will stay 100% working from home, and there are very few who are going to be 100% back to the office. The future of work for us and for different industries is somewhere in between. It is something that we will have to continue to define based on the requirements of our people and the requirements of our clients. We had to reimagine our workforce, and we had to redesign them for more collaboration-focused activities and multi-purpose offices for engagement. And this is something that we have to make investments on as well. And of course, we had to enhance the employee experience in the new setup. We call this the omni-connectedness, and we are leveraging all the new technologies, including new collaboration tools, the metaverse, and even artificial intelligence. And finally, as leaders, we had to be bold in implementing changes. But at the same time, we need to champion empathy and personalized connection. As we define the future of work, both as an industry and as a country, and of course as a company, is that we need to stay globally competitive. We need to invest in the skills of the future, and among them are both technical and soft skills. Let me cite a few examples that we will have to invest in moving forward. Technology skills in cloud and data science and in analytics and in artificial intelligence. We have to make sure that our people have the critical thinking and also the active learning in order to adjust to the ever-changing technology landscape that we are working with and that we are working for our clients. And of course, we have to exercise a new kind of leadership that will have to focus as much on our people as we do on our clients. It is important to champion sustainability. Just as in the past we said that every business is a digital business, moving forward, every business is a sustainable business. Sustainability is the new digital. And here we use the larger umbrella of sustainability, which would include many other areas beyond the environment. It includes, in fact, many of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. For us, as Accenture, while this is a full topic of its own, we are focusing on a path to net zero. As much as we are a services company, we are also we continue to accelerate equality in terms of our inclusion and diversity programs, and we have to embed sustainability as a service for our global and local clients. Our industry, particularly IBPAP, is going to launch its Roadmap 2028 soon. Without preempting the results of these, I believe that this industry will continue to have the opportunity to create hundreds of thousands more jobs in the next 5 to 6 years. And as we create these jobs, quality jobs, is that we will continue to become a pillar of the Philippine industry. Finally, let me just flash the quote from our CEO, and he said that in order to be a great place to work is that we will have to have access to client in the industry. We have to be creators of talent through investments in technology, and that we have to leverage technology to do all of this. And that is the way where we will continue to be able to survive, not only to survive, but to thrive and be successful and grow in the future and become a major player in the Philippine economy. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lito, for that excellent presentation. I have a few questions for Lito myself, but we really encourage all of you who are here in the room and on MS Teams to to join in the conversation after I ask a few questions of Lito. If you're here in the room, you can raise your hand. You can do it now, and my colleagues will take note of it and make sure to call you first later on. If you're on MS Teams, please write in the chat box your question or that you have a question, and my colleague Genevieve will read it out later on. If it's okay with everyone, I'll ask Lito a few questions first, Lito. You started off by talking about how when the crisis arrived, you revisited or realized one should revisit one's core values. How quickly did you realize that needed to be done in the panic of that moment?
Well, I think it is embedded in our thought process. Because as we look for solutions, we have to anchor our solutions on something. That our solutions have to be principle-based, and that's what I mean by we have to go back to our core values. And I thought that was the only way, actually, in order to do, rather than look at individual solutions, we have to look at the basis for those solutions. And that is where the core values and who we are came in.
Did you have to ask yourselves what your core values were, or was that very evident, or did you have to kind of tweak it for the moment?
We didn't have to tweak it for the moment. They were embedded in what we were doing, but in all the solutions, we had to make sure that we're clear what were the principles with which they were based.
Of all the things you did, you talked about chartering 4 flights, which I suspect in your 20 years in Accenture and elsewhere, you never thought you might do. Of all the things that you did, what do you think, maybe aside from that, would be the most surprising to you if I asked you 2.5 years ago, if I told you 2.5 years ago, Lito, you're going to do this?
Well, the fact that our global approved $5 million to give to the community, I think that the $5 million, about 250 million pesos, is significant by any standard. And I was pleasantly surprised.
Had you done similar drives before in smaller scale for different natural disasters?
Yes, in smaller scale, not at that scale.
And how quick and how generous was the response?
It has always been very generous, as I said, but not as generous as what we had during the time of the pandemic.
You talked about how you need to take care of your people, your communities, your clients. In what other ways did you take care of the community?
Well, those are examples that I put in, and I only counted on a few examples. But at the same time, we have a few others that we thought that also would merit. For example, we continued what we call our near-hire training program. The near-hire training program is that we are giving some form of a training for people who are almost hired, but were not, because of a particular deficiency on a particular skill, for example. We were able to continue that during the pandemic by giving the necessary bridging training for these people. And based on our metrics, I think those who graduated from that, about 65% were hired eventually. And these are all for people who were 100% rejected initially, and then we had to retrain them. So those are some examples, and we have a few more examples I can talk about. We had partnership with PBED, for example, for those grade 10 or grade 3, age 10, grade 3, for example, in order to have this pilot run on how technology and tutoring is going to improve their learning. And so those are some examples of what we did during the pandemic.
Both you and in the end you quoted your CEO, Julie Sweet, talking about talent. How important and critical is that to the industry now?
It is the most important and most critical for all of us. This industry is all about talent at the end of the day. And if we don't take care of our client, and if we don't create talent as well, is that we're going to be left behind as far as our capability to grow and to be relevant in our society and economy.
What's the most important thing we need to do there? And before you answer that question, our friend Ramon told me last night that just yesterday you joined the FINMA Education Board. So you have more work to do in education now. Congratulations for that. I hope Ramon is not going to tell me that I'm not supposed to say that yet. What's the most important thing we need to do in education, Lito?
Well, we know what PBED has already been looking at. We do have an education crisis. We are lagging behind many of our counterparts, are the other countries, for example. But let me focus as it relates to my industry. And that is making sure that what we
build as talent or capability in the education sector is going to be what is required by the industry. In other words, we need to bridge that gap between the requirements of the industry and what is being learned by the students. And I think that's a huge challenge. Right now, there is still significant amount of investment, for example, for companies like Accenture and the others. When they hire, you still do some form of training. The ideal situation is that we hire from the education system and they hit the ground running. That will lessen our costs, that will increase our capabilities as well. So that is something that and of course we want to make sure that we have a bigger pool. Right now, not all of the people who graduate from our university or even from our tech block will pass the requirements of our industry. So bridging that gap, I think, is what is just as important for us to address. Beyond, of course, the other problems that we have in basic education.
We'll see if we'll get to that later on. You talked about how the times keep on changing and they remain extraordinary. I think many of us are really tired after 2.5 years of this. Is it going to be as intense going forward, you think?
Personally, I'll answer that on a personal question. I think it's part of the landscape that we all need to adjust to. You know, we see it extraordinary from the standards of pre-pandemic. But as we move forward, I think it's the new standard. And so we all need to adjust to it and make sure that we do things that we need to do in the context of these extraordinary times, which we have to see as now ordinary moving forward.
You're one of the biggest employers in the country, so a lot of the impetus must come from having to keep your employees motivated and to attract employees. Do you get a lot of feedback from them and or a lot of pushback from them?
We do get a lot of feedback. We also do get a lot of pushback. Pushback in the sense that what are the other things that they will need, that we need to address. Even for example, things like how many times do I go to the office? As we said, that's why we keep on defining the future of work that we have. With all the restrictions that we have from a regulatory standpoint, this is something that we will have to focus on. But we do get a lot of feedback, and as we said, and in fact, if you look at the social media piece, some people call me Tito Lito. It's not about me. I take it as a positive that the people call me Tito Lito with all the things that we were doing. But I think it is a reflection of the kind of leadership that we have in Accenture Philippines of taking care of our people, that they see us as those who will take care of them. And I think that is exactly what we need to do to make sure that they feel that we are putting priority into their well-being and into their jobs as well.
I'll ask you, and maybe I'll ask the people in this room maybe to raise their hand. Have the employees gotten more demanding after these 2.5 years? Could I see a show of hands? That's what you want to ask him. Lito, have employees become more demanding or maybe more particular?
Well, I don't look at it as demanding, but I think it is the next generation of employees, for example, it changes. The culture of the students are changing. And we were talking about the Gen X, the Gen Z, the millennials, for example. I think the millennials just have a different expectation from the others, for example. And to some extent, they also are very particular about how they see the company, that the company is not just about doing its own business, but making sure that they're relevant to the communities and to the country. And I think that is one of the employee value propositions.
You and I were just happy to have a job, right? And maybe many people in this room. Maybe one last question for me, then I'll turn to the audience and to the people on MS Teams as well. You talked about this new world. I'll rattle off some of the words that you used. Omni-connectedness, metaverse, AI. What data science? What's that going to be like?
What's it going? I think we see it already happening. You know, many of the applications, without us knowing it, is already going into the cloud. Without us probably knowing, there's a lot more artificial intelligence being used even in the social media that we have. In terms of our clients, for example, as we said, because the pandemic accelerated their digital transformation, and this is going to be using more and more of these new and emerging technologies on their core business. And that is, and we will continue to see that. And of course, it is both an opportunity for us, but in some cases, we also need to be to see it as that there are some areas of our lives that there could be some threats. So for example, artificial intelligence. I think we were just talking about, for example, the ethics of artificial intelligence, and that's exactly some of the things that we need to watch out for as well.
Lito says we were just talking about that because Ramon shared a New York Times article, which maybe some of you saw yesterday, about how AI is much more present in our lives than we might think. And it's one of those articles that spurred a very long discussion in the MVC board thread. So maybe we'll go into that in a bit later on. Could I ask anyone in the audience, and then maybe we'll turn also to MS Teams if they have questions for Lito over here. Could you introduce yourself, your organization, and then please keep your question brief. Thank you. I tell it to everyone, not just to you.
Thank you, Coco. This is with reference to your
I know you, but please reintroduce yourself.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm Frank Isaac from Phoenix. I used to be past president of Phoenix. I run my own company, which is also an IT company, on banking software. Anyway, my question is, from management, when the pre-pandemic, the pandemic, when you outsource, you're already an outsourced company, right? So that means when the people reporting anymore to your offices, they're outsourced parties. The employees are now working from home. That's what I meant. And then you started investing in them, right? Equipment center. My question is only on the cost aspect, that if you are already keeping them away from the offices, so that means you have 25 buildings where you mentioned that. So that means you're keeping them out, so you give up because the cost of paying the rent or lease or anything like that. So I like to see the cost benefit of that. When you move these people there, and even in the States, they don't want to go back to their offices. So this is the factor that I'm trying to look at, because I myself, I don't bring my people anymore. In fact, I gave up one office. I said, stay home, we can communicate online, we can do installation, things like that. So can you tell us more or less the decision that you went through when you made X amount, when you invested in the people, and then maybe say on the lease that you have on the 25? Are they still on it? Still at the 25 buildings?
All right. I won't answer your question directly in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, but let me explain to you the principles with which we went through, again, in terms of deciding how we were going to bring our people back to the office. And as I said in my talk, very few will be 100% work from home. Still fewer are going to be 100% back to the office. The answer is somewhere in between. That somewhere in between is we define it individually for each of our companies, based on what we need for our clients and based also on what we think is best for our people. Now, having said that, as I've said in my talk, we have proven that we can be productive at home. But there are some things that we need to do in the office that cannot be done at home. Interpersonal relationships, engagement activities, even some learning activities, for example. That is how we define the use of our spaces. And so we need to bring our back to the office. We need to bring our people back to the office. And how is going to be defined on what is needed to be done in the office. That is what we mean by the future of work. So it's a combination between the things that they can do at home and the things that they cannot do at home that we need to do back in the office in order for us to continue providing both the high-performance services for clients and also for something that our people will continue to be engaged. It is back. It is here. And that will continue to be, as we said, our future of work. So our future of work, as I said, is going to be based on that premise, that pandemic is here. Whether the pandemic is here, it is going to be based on what we think is needed by our people. In the context that we have proved that our people have been able to work productively at home, at the same time, there are some things that we need to do back in the office.
Does that mean, Lito, whether you reduce your space a little, that the remaining space or the space that's there will be less desks and more of those cool meeting rooms that I've been to your office, I've seen the cool meeting rooms. Are you going to be adding more of those?
Well, as we said, that is precisely what we need to redefine and rethink. Don't get me wrong, we still need some production areas. But at the same time, we also need some other collaboration areas. That's the terminology we'll use, collaboration areas for town hall meetings, for engagement activities, for other things that we need that we cannot do at home, that we need to do back in the office.
Thanks very much. More questions from the audience here? Anyone? Are there questions from MS Teams, Genevieve? None yet? Yes, go ahead. Question here from Joseph.
I'm Joseph Guerta from Business Profile. just work in risk management, crisis, and it was interesting for me to hear even during the pandemic, you increased from 52 to 77,000. I say, well, almost increased the number. Correct. How did you see the logistics in terms of building the work convenient and comfortable for the people working from home? With the technology, the secrecy of informations, managing them on the day-to-day. Now you have to go back again. You're increasing sometimes the number, but you might not using the 25 buildings. I want to understand from in terms of logistics or how you secure your work or the people and managing the people with the term of even during the pandemic or the 2.5 years to increase in the number. That's how I like to see it.
Again, we don't look at it as a logistics issue. Joseph, it's not a logistics issue for us. It's a work arrangement issue for us. And what is the best work arrangement? Of course, as we said, we have invested in technologies that will make them productive. We have invested in connecting their homes, whereas before we didn't have to, because they were all working in the office. Now some of them, or many of them, are working in the office. We have to help in investing in connecting them as well. As I said, we gave them an allowance so that they could buy an air conditioner, or they could buy an ergonomic chair, or a better table, for example. So these are the things, but that's only one side of it. That is the environment. We also need to make sure that they have the right set of tools. Our information security has to be airtight. Our tools for learning that has to be done on a remote basis, for example, has to be effective. So it is a whole ecosystem and set of tools and processes that we are conscious of making that kind of investment in order for us to make our people productive.
Any more from the audience? Here first, and then Miko over there.
Hi, Lito. Thanks for the insightful presentation. My name is Albert from Michael Page. You said a sentence that I will keep in my mind. Sustainability is the new digital, right? So we all care about this topic, and in services it's not easy. So we have also the commitment to be carbon neutral zero by 2026. I would like to know what are the plans or the actions that you are taking in order to go to this path zero. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I smiled because this could be another topic by itself. Sustainability as the new digital is a new topic by itself. But let me just give you a few examples of what we did on this. As we said, our services is not easy to go to net zero. And by the way, that's only one part of sustainability, which is on the environment. But let me give you some examples on this. Way back, even before the pandemic, we decided to change all of our lights to LED. And that is to save electricity. That's one. And we made significant investment in order to change all, no exception, of all the 25 locations that we have, we changed to LED. That's one example. We installed smart meters in our offices so that our people could manage their own electricity consumption. Like during break, for example, they can turn off the lights. And we have some contests so that we will know who's the biggest loser of energy consumption. So these are just some examples of what we do. And we have a whole program. In fact, we have a sustainability council in the Philippines that focuses exactly on programs for sustainability over the long term that we have. And as I said, it includes the bigger umbrella of inclusion and diversity, helping our communities, and a few others under the umbrella of sustainability.
Thanks very much. Miko?
Hello, yes. Good morning. Thank you, Lito and Coco. Just a question, basically. I know the industry today is about 1.3, 1.4 million, and last year was one of the largest employee count that we've hired at 120,000. Just curious to know, as an industry as a whole, what do you think we need to do, I guess, talking about the roadmap you've mentioned, to get to, I guess, to exponentially increase the industry? What are the things we'll have to do as a, I guess, private and public? Thank you.
Miko cares because he represents the real estate industry.
Yeah, of course. But I'm sorry, but I will not preempt the results of the roadmap. It's a huge initiative of IBPAP, and it's coming out very shortly. So we won't have to wait a long time. And so I go back again in terms of concepts that we have. I think we need to prepare the talent. it goes back to talent. Talent is key in order for us to continue to grow. And this is going to be, I'm sure, it is going to be part of the details of the implementation of the roadmap on how to handle and prepare the talent of the future in order for us to take advantage of the opportunities for significant growth in the next few years in the industry.
Thanks very much. Question over there.
I'm Bob Ong from Pueblo de Panay. In this era of hypergrowth for Accenture, and related to our sideline talks earlier, wherein you said that Accenture is open to expanding to the countryside. So my question would be, how would these countryside locators better prepare themselves in order to attract IT BPM locators?
Okay. Of course, I won't speak about Accenture. We have a whole process in terms of evaluating new locations for Accenture. But I think from the industry perspective, first of all, we are very much conscious, and I say, when I say we, I'm telling the direction of the industry, is that we are very conscious of our impact in terms of helping countryside development, particularly those outside of Metro Manila and Cebu. In fact, to the extent that even in the previous roadmap, for example, it was a focus area for us to help develop. But just to answer your question obliquely, the key again, it goes back to talent and infrastructure. Do we have the talent in those locations where we can expand? And do we have the right infrastructure, whether it is the right buildings or connectivity that we have? And it's also interesting to note that different cities will have different value propositions. But the good thing about this is that our industry is so diverse in terms of services that some locations are probably better off done under one. For example, one city probably is turning out better English speakers, and so contact center is better. Another location, for example, has a great university that is turning out technologies in engineering, for example. Then maybe IT is good, or engineering services is going to be better. Another location is turning out good nurses, then healthcare is probably going to go there. So I think each of these locations could also look at it strategically and say, let us attract healthcare here, or IT here, or contact center over here, for example, based on the capability to build those kinds of talent within that particular location.
Bob, what kind of universities are near you?
We have like several universities there, but in our township development, we have the University of Perpetual Help. Yeah.
And what do they focus on?
They allied medical courses.
There you go. Healthcare.
Healthcare.
Thanks, Bob. I think Geneva has a question from MS Teams.
Yes, we do have. Let me read the question. This is from Ms. Geraldine Marshall from Optum. How is Accenture dealing with this FIRB pronouncement? There are no more details.
We talk about this all the time. We almost don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, to be candid about it, you didn't find it in my presentation. Because to be honest, I think there's a different and proper forum to discuss this. And I would rather not discuss it here. But suffice it to say that I know Jenny, of course, is that with Jenny and the other players in the industry, we're working this out, and we have constant conversations and discussions with PEZA, with BOC, with FIRB, with BIR, and the other agencies of the government. I'm sorry, there's not much I could add about it, because I don't think that this is the right forum to talk about these issues or whatever issues we have.
Thanks very much. Question over there. Is that Bing? Yep. Mike in the back.
Bing de Guzman. I'm in the both hospital and college. My question is with regards to the IT startups. How do you assess the state of IT startups in the Philippines? What are the challenges? And does Accenture get involved in, you're helping some of them develop strategies and, get involved with some of these startups?
Thank you, Bing. Of course, I know you. We're both in the same organization in Ateneo. Thanks for the question.
Which org is that?
Management Engineering, FAME. we're in the board. But to be candid, we're not involved directly with startups in the technology. But I think there is some relevance in what we're doing in technology with those startups and those pushing for the technology. I cite a particular example. In some courses in technology, for example, we cooperate with some of the universities. Again, I just cite this as an example. I can't get into the details. Let's say we can create an elective, let's say in SAP, with one of the universities, provide the materials, provide the initial teachers, and then later on, those who graduate from that, for example, we were hired in Accenture. That, I will look at it as a framework. And so we could replicate that. If it's in SAP, we can do that in cloud, we can do that in artificial intelligence with different universities and with different industry partners. And so we can replicate that and scale. And so if there are new IT companies, for example, that are focusing on one particular area, is that they can use this same framework of collaboration through the academe, so that we could push for the kinds of skills and capability that are needed by the IT industry. I know what you're saying, and in fact, if you look at the whole IT BPM industry in the Philippines, we have a lot of opportunity to grow in technology in particular. India, on the other hand, have anchored their whole IT BPM industry on technology. We have yet to catch up in terms of scaling this opportunity in technology. And to be candid about it, I think Accenture is the biggest IT company in the Philippines because, obviously we have IT, we have BPO, we have Strategy Consulting, but in terms of IT in absolute count, is that we're one of the biggest. And part of it is making sure that we make the right investments in technology because it is not natural, for our, for those coming out of the universities to be able to get immediately in a big scale for the IT subsector in particular.
Thanks very much. Are there any more questions from the room or on MS Teams? One question here.
Hello, Jessica from Calabria. So I have a question on gender balance and diversity. Being the only woman here in the room.
Don't stress that too much. It's quite embarrassing that there's only one woman here.
Hello. Okay, so what are the steps Accenture taking towards gender balance and diversity?
I'm glad you asked it because this is my opportunity to boast about Accenture's inclusion and diversity.
This is actually going to be my last question. So now you've stolen my question because I know Lito feels very deeply about this.
And first of all, I'm very proud that we are the poster country in all of Accenture for inclusion and diversity. Today we have 54, I just looked at the statistics yesterday. We have 54% of our people who are women. We are probably one of the most gender-balanced organizations, both in Accenture and outside of Accenture. And what is interesting about that is that we're able to maintain a similar, not exactly the same, but similar ratio to the executive level and to the managing director level. So and we are able to do this with proactive approaches. And one of them I'd like to cite here is that we have what we call recruitment mix for gender inclusion. So even during recruitment, we have a target for our HR recruitment to say, you need to recruit 54%. For this year, every month, you have to recruit 54% women, both at the entry level and at the executive level. So it's a conscious effort for us. And as I said, during the pandemic, it was easy for us to simply downplay that metric, but we did not. Even during the pandemic, we had to make sure that our recruitment mix is at the level with which we have made sure that it was part of our plans at the beginning. So that's only one example. We have a few others, and it also includes other inclusion and diversity areas. For example, as I said, but I didn't clarify on it on my slide, we have 3.7% of our people who are self-declared persons with disabilities. The government requires only 1%, and it is recommended. It's not even required. We have 3.7% of our people in the Philippines as self-declared persons with disabilities. Similar story in LGBT. We have a substantial number. We have one of the biggest allies of LGBTs in all of Accenture. And so these are some of the things that we're proud of, and we hope to continue to focus on inclusion and diversity in all of its areas, and not just in gender balance.
Thanks very much. Any last questions? If there is none, my last question, Lito, will be, but don't answer it yet. From these 2.5 years, what's the biggest thing you've learned, and also maybe a final message to your co-leaders here. But before Lito answers that question, could I ask everyone in the audience to give us some feedback on today's event? You see a QR code on your tables. If you can scan that and fill the feedback form. For those on MS Teams, we're flashing a QR code right now, or one of my colleagues is posting a link. We'd really appreciate it if you fill in the feedback form there. And while everyone's answering that question, let me ask Lito, what's the biggest learning you've had from these 2.5 years? And maybe a final message to your co-leaders here, Lito.
I'll keep it short because I've talked too much and already. And I just go back to what I said during the presentation. During this pandemic, as I said, we go back to our core values. And for us, that's an implementation of being a responsible business. And all I can say is that being a responsible business is good for business.
Thanks very much. Please join me in thanking Lito. We're going to take a couple of photos now. First, we're going to take a photo of everybody in MS Teams who's willing to turn on their cameras. And on the count of 3, could I ask them to smile or to wave? So those of you who are in MS Teams, if you could turn on your cameras, please. And on the count of 3, could you give us a big smile and a wave maybe? 1, 2, and 3. And one more time. 1, 2, and 3. Are they frozen? And 1, 2, and 3. Are they frozen, guys? There they are. 1, 2, and 3. And one more. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on MS Teams. For those who are here in the room, Lito, if you'll join me in the center, could I ask anyone who's willing to stand up around us and beside us? And one of my colleagues is going to take a photo from the front. If you would join us here, we will look this way. If everyone in the room could join us here, those who are willing. Let me move to the side. Please come in. So we have an overhead shot so that everyone can be seen. Okay. Is everyone seen? Yeah? Should we, no one's behind that banner? No. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. And 1, 2, and 3. Could I get a wave from everyone? 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Are we okay? All right. Everyone, thank you very much. Lito, thank you again. We want to thank all of our partners and sponsors. Before everyone goes, allow me to give some reminders of our upcoming events. We have a new MBC Echo dashboard, which we invite everyone to check out. And we have 2 upcoming events as well. Atotan Manjong will be speaking on September 27, the 4th in this series. And following that, on September the 13th, we have an agricultural productivity event with Marco Guida from True Digital, our new partner from Thailand. And finally, we invite you to check out our website and our social media for continuing updates from MBC. Thank you, everybody. Please have a good day and good afternoon. Thank you.
leading in extraordinary,